Now, here are Morgan Streetman and Roxanne Wilder.
Well, good morning, fellas. Good to see Morgan Streetman. Good to see Pat George. It's good to see human beings in general. It's good to make eye contact with people. And
even though we're through the looking glass here, again, obviously I'm quarantined over here. That's okay. Beasley
we're self-isolating.
Beasley
You're quarantined. You're safe. Yes.
Well, it is kind of funny just thinking about it. How fast things have changed in our world.
I thought of that this morning. We had our very first coronavirus patient March 2nd.
Was that when in Florida?
In Hillsborough County.
In Hillsborough County.
Our first one, March 2nd. Mm-hmm. And look, we're just a little into April now.
Month later.
Wow.
And everything's different. No more shaking hands.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think that'll come back. We've talked some about that. I don't think the personal touch is coming back here. I still see Vice President Pence at the press conferences grabbing people and stuff by the back and patting them on the back, the generals and other military people and other people that are involved at the press conference. But by and large, I think people, if you go to try to give somebody a hug in a couple of months, let's say we get through this in a couple of months, you go try to give somebody a hug, they're going to
run.
Stand back,
yes.
sir.
Oh, yeah.
Just a minute.
What about kids? What about kids, though? Because they are going to go and play with each other. And are we going to start to tell them, hey, don't touch your friends, don't, what's society going to be like for the long term?
This may be a new cultural thing. I had somebody come into my office. Now, this is a couple of weeks ago, and the person was kind of lost. They were looking for an attorney that apparently used to be in the office that I'm now in. And she had her I think it was her grandkids with her. But boy, was she telling them, every time, a couple of seconds would pass, she would correct it. Don't touch that. Don't touch that. And they had on those little gloves that you used to get, like you see the bakers wear at Publix, just the clear plastic ones. Not the ones that you see people wearing at the hospital, just those clear plastic ones. But the kids had those gloves on. But even still, she was saying, don't touch. And of course, at that time, I'm thinking, goodness gracious, this is just a strange scene playing itself out here in my office.
As a mom, I've always kind of followed the rule of thumb. Okay, don't touch it if it's hot. And don't touch it if it's poisonous, and don't touch it if it's sharp. But everything else, that's how they develop, especially toddlers. They're developing their sensory skill sets, and so it's kind of important. But now we have to worry so much about these germs. And what's going to happen once we get back into society, and we do need those good germs to build immune systems and to, have the normal exchange. If everything is too sanitized, didn't we hear about that prior to all this? Too much sanitization can be bad for us overall.
Yeah, right. We can develop kind of like blind spots in our immune systems where they aren't ready for what's coming. Are we going to get back to children licking the trash can? That's what we all want to know. Are we going to get back there?
Yeah, good memory, Mark.
No, the water fountain. When they try to put their mouth on the water fountain, they're too short. They put their mouth right over it.
And they end up like making out with the water fountain. And you go, yeah, I really want to go use that now.
Well, we got to kind of keep a little bit of a sense of humor about some of this stuff because everything is so dour now and all the news is making this a terrible crisis. And, some of the later numbers, now I'm sure that we've got updated numbers even still this morning, but is it just me or is it impossible to keep up with the numbers? But the latest numbers that I've seen, and this was as of about midnight last night, was about 26,000 new cases in the U.S. in the last 24 hours, bringing our total cases in the U.S. to over 337,000 cases. Now, of those, apparently almost 10,000 people have died. Now, a couple of things I think are interesting. We've performed apparently 1.7 million tests so far, and that may be part of the reason that you see our numbers shooting up, particularly relative to other countries, is we are performing so many more tests in our country now than they are in most other countries.
100,000 here just in the state of Florida, more than any other state except New York.
And, so already, and I think we're going to continue to perform I think close to about 100,000 per day is the number that I heard that are going to be performed across this country now going forward. Now, that could slow down if the people who are requesting tests slow down because, there does seem to have been some effect from this mitigation, although I have to say it's hard to tell. And if you've been watching the presidential daily briefings, you'll see that the scientists, as much as they claim that they know stuff and this is how it's going to happen, The truth is they have to recalibrate their thought processes pretty regularly, and they have to look at different models pretty regularly. Now, a lot of these cases are just in New York City. And, I mean, what we've talked about on the show wouldn't it be great if we could find a treatment for this? And that's part of what has been going on. There's been some research. I mean, just about a week ago, the FDA issued emergency authorization for the use of something called hydroxychloroquine to combat the coronavirus. Now, that's a anti-malaria drug that's been used for 50 or 60 years now and is generally safe. I mean, it doesn't kill people if things go wrong with it. I mean, I think the worst that could happen is it might not work, although if you look at some of the studies, some of the smaller studies that have been done, although there have been some doctors that claim to have treated up to 500 people, it seems to be pretty effective. Now, I think the president had some pretty interesting things to say about this, and I wanted to share with you his clip from yesterday's presidential daily briefing on this particular issue. Let's hear from President Trump.
And the other thing that we've bought a tremendous amount of is the hydroxychloroquine, which I think, as you know, it's a great malaria drug. It's worked unbelievably. It's a powerful drug on malaria. And there are signs that it works on this, some very strong signs. And in the meantime, it's been around a long time. It also works very powerfully on lupus. So there are some very strong, powerful signs, and we'll have to see because, again, it's being tested now. This is a new thing that just happened to us, the invisible enemy, we call it. And if you have no signs of heart problems, azithromycin, which will kill certain things that you don't want living within your body. It's a powerful drug. If you don't have a problem, a heart problem, we would say let your doctor think about it. But as a combination, I think they're going to be, I think there's two things that should be looked at very strongly. Now, we have purchased and we have stockpiled 29 million pills of the hydroxychloroquine, 29 million. A lot of drugstores have them by prescription, and they're not expensive. We're sending them to various labs, our military, we're sending them to the hospitals, we're sending them all over. I just think it's something, the expression, I've used it for certain reasons. What do you have to lose? What do you have to lose? And a lot of people are saying that when, and are taking it, if you're a doctor, a nurse, a first responder, a medical person going into hospitals, they say taking it before the fact is good, but what do you have to lose? They say take it. I'm not looking at it one way or the other, but we want to get out of this. If it does work, it would be a shame if we didn't do it early. But we have some very good signs. So that's hydroxychloroquine and azithromycin. And again, you have to go through your medical people, get the approval. But I've seen things that I sort of like. So what do I know? I'm not a doctor. But I have common sense. The FDA feels good about it. As you know, they've approved it. They gave it a rapid approval. And the reason, because it's been out there for a long time, and they know the side effects, and they also know the potential. So based on that, we have sent it throughout the country. We have it stockpiled, about 29 million doses. 29 million doses. So we have a lot of it. We hope it works.
And I mean, if you were sick, wouldn't you want to give that a try? I mean, what's the worst that could happen? President Trump makes a great point. We'll be right back on the Morgan Streetman Show. Welcome back to the Morgan Streetman Show. Well, Pat George, I haven't missed a post by that far in quite a few months. I'll
You're
tell
the
you what.
postmaster.
I normally I'm right on the spot, Johnny on the spot, but that one we had a little miscommunication, and I thought I was coming right up on the hard break, and so I jumped
perfect.
right off.
I mean, you did hit it.
And I hit it perfect, and then the music started. So I had another 30 seconds of that scintillating music that we've got here on the Morgan Streetman Show, which we all really enjoy by this time now, having heard it, 10,000 times over the years. Isn't it great music? I actually have to say, whoever picked the music, and I'm imagining it might have been Sarge, whoever picked the music really did a fantastic job. Maybe it was you, Roxanne, way back when.
It wasn't me. I can't take credit for that. I'm sorry. I wish I could.
Pat, maybe you?
Not me.
Okay. All right. We'll figure it out one of these days. Well, so what we were talking about before the break, and I wanted to circle back to it because you'll get a little bit of the feel. If you haven't been able to watch these presidential daily briefings, I really think they've got some of the best information that you can get out there on what's going on with the coronavirus in the U.S. Now, they're really focused on the U.S. primarily, but they do have some great information. And if you listen to the scientists day after day and the military people, but particularly the scientists, day after day, that being Dr. Fauci and Dr. Birx primarily, you start to sort of see the pattern of how these things are developing. You see when they lose confidence in the models that they've been touting in the meetings that they've been talking about, you can see that their confidence level in the models changes. And you can start to see how fast it changes, how it can go from them essentially saying that we're looking at between 1 and 2.1 million deaths in this country, and now we're down to maybe 100,000 to 240,000. And now those model statements are coming with a lot of hedges. It's coming with, well, that's if the model's correct. And now you have to remember the model's based on New York and the model's based on Italy. And it might not be the same because if we were to look at, say, Washington State or California, those states are not tracking the same way that New York is, where New York has basically a third of all the coronavirus cases in the entire United States are in the state of New York and a bunch of them in New York City. So if we're basing our model strictly on that, the numbers are going to look a whole lot worse than possibly they're going to turn out to be. And you can hear them saying that at the press conferences. You could also listen in then to when the press actually gets a chance to ask questions. And what that's going to do, if you listen to that, it's going to somewhat continue to erode your faith in the mainstream media, if you had any left to begin with. It's going to continue to erode your faith in them, though, because of the way that they ask questions. They're basically trying to set up these gotcha questions the entire time with President Trump. They're not asking for information. They're not seeking out facts. They're not trying to uncover something or look into something. They're basically getting back and forth with the president about, well, you said this, but actually the reality is that. And, didn't you really cause people to die by what you said? I mean, that's at the end of all of their questions. That's the implication of a lot of what they ask. And so we played some of what the president said about hydroxychloroquine, which is very promising. Now I wanted to play for you a follow-up question from one of the reporters there at the briefing and let you hear, just how they styled the follow-up. Because, you listen to the president's statement about it, and he went so far as to say, look, I'm not a doctor. I'm not giving you medical advice. You talk to your doctor. How many disclaimers are necessary? Are we even allowed to talk about anything when it comes to medicine? If I had a good result from some kind of medicine, would I be allowed to mention that to you? Or am I now somehow delving into the practice of medicine without a license? Give me a break.
They even let Trump wear it for the guy who ate it out of his fish tank or who made his own concoction of hydrochloroquine that wasn't actually really hydrochloroquine, but it was something else. And he even got in trouble for that.
Right. They blamed that on him. Somebody, and there was more to that story than meets the eye, because you look into the wife there that apparently is the one who came up with a concoction to feed her husband that killed him. And, there's plenty more to get into on that particular story. But just sticking today with what we wanted to cover here with this hydroxychloroquine, because one of the reasons we're trying to mention it here on this show, we should give the disclaimer, I guess. Do you need the disclaimer that I'm not a doctor? Do you ever listen to the show? You don't know that? I'm just a guy just reporting on stuff. But I can tell you what I've seen, just like President Trump, what I've seen looks pretty darn promising on this. And, I think President Trump really hit the nail on the head when he said, what have you got to lose? If you're sick, what have you got to lose? Think about that. And why shouldn't somebody be able to try whatever there is that they can get their hands on that might be of help to them? I mean, do you own your own body as a concept? And that's something you need to think about over the next week. Do you own your own body? And if you own your own body, why can't you put into it whatever you choose, whether it be a medicine or something else, as long as you don't hurt somebody else from that? Why can't you do what you choose with your own body? Well, let's hear the question, the gotcha question from the media.
Mr. President, as President of the United States, your words carry enormous weight in this country and around the world. And while you acknowledge you're not a physician, you do promote these medicines extensively here. How do you not go so far as to be giving medical advice? And you said yesterday you might take some of these medicines even though you don't have symptoms. Are you still planning to do that? And how do you calibrate being enthusiastic and not playing doctor?
Because I want people to live. And I'm seeing people dying. And I've seen people that are going to die without it. And you know the expression, when that's happening, they should do it. What really do we have to lose? We also have, this medicine's been tested for many years for malaria and for lupus, so it's been out there. So it's a very strong, powerful medicine, but it doesn't kill people. We have some very good results and some very good tests. You've seen the same test that I have. In France, they had a very good test. They're continuing. But we don't have time to go and say, gee, let's take a couple of years and test it out. And let's go and test with the test tubes and the laboratories. We don't have time. I'd love to do that. But we have people dying today. As we speak, there are people dying. If it works, that'd be great. If it doesn't work, we know for many years, malaria, it's incredible what it's done for malaria. It's incredible what it's done for lupus. But it doesn't kill people. That's one of the things with a vaccine. When we have a vaccine, we have to do tests because when you inject that vaccine, when they take whatever it is they have to take, we have to make sure it doesn't have a horrible impact, destroy somebody. Could. So we have to test it for a long period of time. This one, not so much because it's been out there. Now, I'm not acting as a doctor. I'm saying do what you want. But there are some good signs. You've read the signs. I've read the signs. With the other one, there's some very good signs also. Different going together works very well. But there may be an indication that if you have a problem with your heart, you shouldn't take what we call the Z-Pack. You shouldn't take it, and that's okay. But I would love to go to a laboratory and spend a couple of years testing something. We don't have time. We don't have 2 hours because there are people dying right now. If it does help, great. If it doesn't help, we gave it a shot. We gave it a shot. That's the way I feel. And you know, we've had some unbelievable results. Unbelievable results. And it also gives the people hope.
I tell you what, if I get sick, the first thing I'm doing is getting out a Sharpie and going to the mirror and writing hydroxychloroquine on my forehead because I want to make sure they know I want that stuff if I get sick. If I wind up in the hospital, give me that stuff. That's what I want. I want the doctor to prescribe that for me, and I want to take that. I want to give that a shot. And I'd be curious to hear from you folks if you want to give that a shot at home, or are you thinking, you know what, maybe we better just wait. We better just wait until we run these double-blind placebo trials. Just give it a couple of years. If I get sick and die in the interim, well, you know what? That's just the way the cookie crumbles sometimes, right? We need to make sure this works before we give it to anyone, right? That if you feel that way, we'd love to hear from you as well. So if you want to get on the horn with us, call us at 888-404-1010. And we've got even more to cover in this show. One of the things I wanted to cover, I don't know if you've been paying at all attention to the United Kingdom, Britain, Great Britain, England, during this time period. But, you know, the prime minister just yesterday, he's had the virus for about 10 days now. Mm-hmm. And just yesterday afternoon,
hospitalized.
He was hospitalized. Now that, you know, you can't think that's a good sign. Now they're downplaying it in the British press. And the British people tend to be fairly understated to begin with. I don't know if you saw some of his, he gave an address, well, not really an address, but kind of an update by video phone from his home from number 10 Downing Street where he's isolated. And the Queen also gave an address yesterday. In fact, he went to the hospital, I think, right about the time the Queen's address started. And she, in her typical understated British way, gave an address on this that we just wanted to share a little clip from with everybody just to give you a flavor of what the Queen had to say about the coronavirus and what they're doing in Britain.
I'm speaking to you at what I know is an increasingly challenging time. A time of disruption in the life of our country. A disruption that has brought grief to some, financial difficulties to many, and enormous changes to the daily lives of us all. We should take comfort that while we may have more still to endure, better days will return. We will be with our friends again. We will be with our families again. We will meet again. But for now, I send my thanks and warmest good wishes to you all.
Well, I tell you, we can't wait till this thing's over, right? We can't wait till we can be with our families, our friends, and we can meet again in person, in public, and get back to life. Get this country working again. Get back to life as it should be.
Do you feel like there are some people that are going to have to ease back into it? I know which one I am. I'm going to run out the door wherever I can go. I'm back in.
You know this is going to catch on slowly. People are going to be reticent to go out in public and do things. You know there's going to be long-term after effects to this virus. We'll be right back.
Welcome back to the Morgan Streetman Show. Lots to still get into today. And we were discussing, Morgan, a little bit off air, how it's alarming when you think about these press conferences because you just described what you get out of them. I mean, They're very chock full of information. You've got a panel of people providing that information. And yet there are groups within the media who are saying, we can't air this. This should not be aired. It's dangerous.
Well, they see Trump's poll numbers going up and they think, wait, this was supposed to take him down. Remember how excited they were about the idea that the coronavirus would take down the Trump administration? And now his poll numbers are going up. So, oh my gosh, what do? We got to put a stop to this, and they don't want to air it anymore. Now, I have to tell you, these press conferences are kind of like a tour de force because the president goes on sometimes for about 2 hours straight in these press conferences. The entire time, he's just sort of speaking off the cuff without notes. So we got a caller. Let's go to our caller then, because we did ask for somebody to call if they had some input. So we're going to go right to our caller. And what did you say? I didn't catch the name, Pat George.
Oh, just a caller.
Oh, just a caller. Okay. I was like, was that Colleen? I couldn't tell. All right. Here we go. Hey, caller, you're on with Morgan Streetman and Roxanne Wilder and Pat George.
Hey, good morning, Morgan. First of all, I wanted to say I love your show, and to tell you that I got the virus, I would definitely take that drug.
Well, thank you. I mean, why wouldn't you, right? What have you got to lose?
Exactly. I think President Trump is doing a fantastic job, and I'm so tired of the fake news always attacking him.
They really are. We couldn't even play but just a fraction of the press conference for you. Now, have you been watching the press conferences?
I have.
And what's your take on them? Do you think you get good information from those and maybe information you don't hear in the mainstream media?
Yes. The only news station I watch is Fox.
Okay. Well, and you can get that presidential daily briefing, too. If you say, you know what, I can't watch Fox News because I just don't like the president, I don't like Fox, you can get that on C-SPAN, too. So, it's not a partisan thing. This presidential daily briefing is for everybody. It's for the entire country, and the president doesn't make it a political thing when he does the briefing. He just tries to give information. He puts the doctors on when appropriate to share what they know. He puts the military people on, the military logisticians on to tell what's going on with the movement of goods and supplies throughout the country. All this important stuff. And I have to tell you, I'm impressed by the president's stamina. Because
exactly.
that these briefings are coming at the end of a long day of meetings, long day of input, and then he's going to stand up there in a suit on a stage for a couple of hours, take questions off the cuff from the media that are all designed as gotcha questions. So he's under the hot light, and he's going to answer them off the cuff without notes and just basically it's very much of a demonstration of his stamina and his ability to manage this crisis. Now, let me ask you, caller, what do you think? Have you seen anything out of Joe Biden? Has Joe Biden done anything like that you've seen?
Absolutely not. He cannot even answer a simple question.
Yeah, they're hiding him at his house.
I know.
Oh, Pat, you're showing me, I guess, is the governor on right now? And what's he saying? Do you know? No, just got him on Periscope. Okay, well, it's an amazing time that we live in with so many sources of information coming in all the time. It's almost information overload, and it's hard to keep up with it all. But caller, thank you very much for calling in. I'm glad to hear that you would take the hydroxychloroquine. Why? Just because, again, I'm like President Trump. I want to save lives. People should give this a shot. We're talking about 500 people from one doctor in New York that he's treated with this. 0 hospitalizations, 0 intubations, 0 deaths. That's a pretty good outcome. Now, maybe it doesn't work for everybody. Maybe it doesn't work for 1 or 2 out of 1,000. Maybe more. Maybe it doesn't work for a couple hundred out of 1,000. But for those people that it does work for, boy, it really, really works. And I know, and like the caller said, if I went to the hospital, that's the first thing I'd be asking for.
Governor DeSantis.
Exactly.
Well, thank you so much for the call. Appreciate it. Anybody else wants to get on the line with us, give us a call at 888-404-1010. What were you going to say about it?
We did see that Governor DeSantis is actually holding a roundtable on the COVID-19 response right now. That's what that's about.
I see.
Answering questions, kind of like what you alluded to with the president when you're more off the cuff. It feels like this is something we're all going through that's new to everyone and is affecting everyone. So sometimes you want to hear someone speak that way because it's from the heart and it's and it's true.
Yeah. Well, and it's nice to see them doing something, right? I mean, you want to see them. I mean, this is, we talked about this before, and I'm no huge fan of government involvement, but, crisis like this is a particular time. Well, first of all, we've just got to use the systems that are already in existence, and government is probably our biggest system that's in existence and our most powerful system in this country and in the various states. So we've got to work with what we've got. And, I mean, it's good to see our political leadership trying to do something about this. One of the things, speaking of governors and doing things about the coronavirus, one of the stories we wanted to touch on is all the governors that are releasing prisoners from jails and prisons, and they're calling them nonviolent offenders and low-risk offenders. But, I mean, we've seen stories, and we've seen almost 1,000 people, and that was a week ago, were released from New York State prisons. And, there have also been a bunch released in other states like Washington and California. And the answer that they're giving as to why would you do this? Why are you setting the prisoners loose on the streets? And it's because, well, they might get COVID-19. They might get the coronavirus if we leave them in jail. And it's like, well, might they not get the coronavirus if you let them out of jail? I mean, and now we've got criminals on the streets. I saw a story out of Washington State where they had a guy who actually pleaded guilty to first-degree child molestation, and because he's currently awaiting sentencing and hasn't been sentenced yet, they've released him on his own recognizance. So they've just released him back into the community. Hey, listen, it was his first offense. He just molested it's a 65-year-old man, just molested a 10-year-old girl. When he was ready to be tried, he was in jail on a $50,000 bond. But now that he's already been convicted, he's pleaded guilty. Instead of sentencing him, we're going to let him out now into the community. Where do you think this guy is going to go? And by the way, I'm not even sure, well, let's just say I don't know if he could maybe leave the country. I mean, I know a lot of people facing a lengthy jail sentence would look to try to maybe leave the country. And, I don't know if that's possible for him. But let's just say the news article went so far as to say this is the first conviction that he has in this country. So now this is a Washington State newspaper. They're very politically correct up there. So what do you think they're really telling you about this guy? Maybe he's not even here legally. And if he's not here legally and they just let him out of jail, I mean, isn't he going to make a run for the border? I mean, isn't that what we'd expect? You
brought up the very logical point that you could get it in jail and you could get it outside of jail as well. But what about for those who are being released? It's not exactly an opportune time to get back out and find a job.
Yeah, what are they going to do for work? Where are they going to live? Well, I mean, what are you going to do? You can't make any money. And you already know folks that have served time, they have a hard time getting a job. They have a hard time reintegrating into society. What about now when all the businesses are shut down? Nobody's hiring. You need some short order cooks? No. You need some delivery people? No, don't really need anything right now. In fact, what we need right now is a handout from the federal government so we can even just keep paying people for their jobs. And that's what's supposed to be coming with this Paycheck Protection Program. But, there's this concept, and I've seen an article out there that talked about this, and it was a concept I kind of wanted to explore and open up into our Out There segment, and that is the concept of demonic possession and some kind of demonic influence with this coronavirus. Now, that's a pretty out there concept, but like I said, we've already seen articles coming out in religious-oriented publications, specifically Catholic publications, that we've seen articles coming out about there being some kind of demonic influence involved in this coronavirus thing. And I just think it's very interesting to think about. Obviously, modern science says that those types of things don't exist. And, maybe they do and maybe they don't. Like the president says, maybe it's real and maybe it's not real. It's hard to know. I can tell you there are exorcists in the Catholic Church who believe it's real. In fact, there's a book coming out fairly soon. The book is called, we actually got a pre-publication copy of the book to preview and talk about on the show. And the book is called The Devil is Afraid of Me. And it's all about the Vatican's top exorcist for many, many years. He died a few years ago, but his name was Father Gabriel Amorth. And he was the top exorcist. And apparently he's performed something like 100,000 or more exorcisms during his lifetime. I mean, it's hard to even believe that. Of course, when we're thinking of exorcisms, we're thinking of what we've seen in Hollywood, which is like a multi-hour, multi-day process, right? And apparently that's part of it. And so one of the ways that he's performed so many is one of the things about the nature of the exorcisms is that you have to perform them multiple times. So you might see somebody who's got some kind of possession every day for months or maybe even years, or once a week for months or maybe even years, et cetera, et cetera. But there are some publications coming out that are saying, and they're interviewing priests and other people, and they're saying, there is a heavy demonic influence involved in this coronavirus thing. And just think about it. I mean, just think about the nature of it. One, they've closed all the churches. People can't even go to church now. Yeah, I know you can go via Zoom meeting, but you know how connected do you feel and how much attention do you pay when you go to church via Zoom? It's not the same, right? And something that happened in our own Bay Area exactly a week ago, right after we got off the air, in fact, or we would have reported on it, is they went and they arrested a pastor. They arrested Rodney Howard Brown, who's the senior pastor and founder of the River Church, which is out there in Mango. If you're not familiar with it, it's kind of an evangelical church out there in Mango. It's quite a large church. They've got a big auditorium, and they were still holding services. And in fact, they held services a week ago Sunday. And then Chad Chronister, the sheriff, came out and said, no, you can't do that. We've banned gatherings of more than 10 people. And you're flaunting that order. Forget about the First Amendment. Forget about freedom of religion. You're flaunting the government's order that no more than 10 people can gather, and we're taking you to jail. So we're letting child molesters, admitted, convicted child molesters out of jail because, oh my gosh, they might get sick in jail. And we're letting thousands of other people, convicted criminals across the country, out of jail because they might get sick, but we're jailing pastors for conducting religious services in this country. Now, you talk about a demonic influence, and wouldn't that be exactly what a demonic influence would try to accomplish? And that's what we see playing out before us. So we're going to continue this Out There segment when we come back on the Morgan Streetman Show.
And we're back on the Morgan Streetman Show. And what I do love about Out There is we sort of got into it a little bit during the last segment, and it's like all of a sudden we're talking about one thing and yes, we go out there. We ramped up.
Well, I'm glad I'm not the first one to bring it up. I had the thought, just as a thought, and of course, it's so interesting to think about different things. It doesn't, you got to be careful. A friend of mine tells me you got to be careful. You can't always believe the things that you think And I think that's important to remember. But it is an interesting thought. And could there be some other component of this, a spiritual component, essentially, of this sickness? I know I've seen that alluded to in the press, both as, the question of, is God angry with us, and has he sent this as a plague on us? And, that's a thought as well. You could think that through. That one didn't catch me as much as the idea of, is there, a spiritual or demonic component to sickness and plagues? And I thought that was pretty interesting to think about. So there definitely is a karmic component to all this as well, because are you thinking more about all the little things you do each day and how it adds up in society, of the branch of covering your mouth, not being close to people, all these little things, not touching your face, and then also doing these little things to keep the economy going, tipping this person, buying this. So it's this realization karmically that all these little things add up. Well, and that's an interesting word choice that you use there, because that same word choice is used by somebody who's, reasonably famous, who's gotten coronavirus. And I don't know if you're familiar with him. His name is Chris Cuomo. If you remember Chris Cuomo from CNN, most of you probably know who he is. There was that joke where the guy called him Fredo, and then he threatened to throw the guy down the stairs and basically stomp his head in at the bottom of the stairs or something like that. Just kind of lost it on the guy for calling him Fredo, which I thought was kind of humorous. But anyway, he didn't obviously find it very humorous. Well, he's come down with the coronavirus, and he's been self-isolating, and he's been reporting on it on CNN, both during his show and on other programs. So it's some interesting stuff that he's had to say that really caught my ear when viewed in light, like I said, of some of these stories that we've seen, particularly the ones I've seen in Catholic press. And I'll just point out that I'm not Catholic myself, but I try to read pretty broadly. And in the Catholic press, I've been seeing some references to the fact that this has some sort of demonic connection, and also potentially connection to exorcism and other things. Now, some people would call that anti-science, but let's just listen to what Chris Cuomo has to say about what he's been experiencing.
I'm doing well. The beast comes at night. As we know, the healthcare workers have taken to calling the virus the beast.
The beast.
I understand why. My fever has gone up a couple of degrees in the last 30 minutes. Nights are tough. And you have these wicked phantasmagorical experiences that are not dreams. When I say I saw my father sitting on the end of the bed, I would have gladly raised my hand as an affiant and testified to it under oath easily.
Wicked phantasmagorical experiences that are not dreams. It almost sounds like somebody describing like a DMT trip or something, where you're having these crazy hallucinations. I've never done DMT myself, but I have heard people, I think Joe Rogan and others have described having taken it, and it sounds like it's pretty wild experiences, and that somehow you interact with entities maybe from the other side, whatever that means.
Well, your fever does get up there.
On COVID or DMT, Pat George? I know you got to be careful now. Specify what you're talking about, because I know Pat George hasn't done any DMT
You're exactly
either.
right about that.
And all fevers do spike at night.
Yeah. And so the fever, just the raised temperature can cause you to hallucinate. But isn't it interesting connecting it to the beast and connecting it to some kind of, when you're using terms like phantasmagorical, that maybe I just came out of the 80s too much and remember that some of those movies, but that just sounds like one of those movies like Freddy Krueger or something coming at you. Now let's hear what he had to say, because he was on with also his brother, talking to his brother, Andrew Cuomo, the governor of New York, about this stuff. And he also apparently saw his brother in a hallucination, which he describes to his brother. So listen to him tell about this.
I really believe that it didn't start until I got the diagnosis, maybe because psychosomatic or whatever. But that night I got hit with fever and those rigors, spelled like rigors, R-I-G-O-R-S. But it was like out of a movie. I tell you, I had the hallucination. I was seeing Pop. You came to me in a dream. You had on a very interesting ballet outfit, and you were dancing in the dream, and you were waving a wand and saying, I wish I could wave my wand and make this go away. And then you spun around and you danced away.
He almost sounds like a little leprechaun there, but I don't know what did he mean by the L.A. outfit? I mean, one can only wonder what kind of L.A. outfit. I mean, am I missing something, or does that mean like Los Angeles? I'm thinking it's like a clubbing outfit or something from when Andrew Cuomo was going out in L.A. One can only imagine exactly what that was referring to, bro. But anyway, just some interesting thoughts about this coronavirus and the connection to spiritual warfare and demonic activity.
It's very interesting, too, when you think about this, how this has all been explained, and you hear even Trump has called it, okay, this is a fight against the invisible enemy. You have to have that mindset of good versus evil in this world. There is war. There are differences, there are altercations, and there's probably one person or entity operating from a good side and one from a not good side.
Yeah, and if you want to check some of this out, because the article is really fascinating, it's on a site called LifeSite News. That's site S-I-T-E, LifeSite News, and it's an opinion piece. It posted April 3rd. That was last Friday. And it said, priests reveal how coronavirus crisis has unleashed intense demonic activity. And it actually gets into describing some different people's hallucinations that they've had when they've gotten the coronavirus. And it's very similar and maybe a little bit more detailed than what you just heard from Chris Cuomo about the hallucinations that he was having, both of his father at the end of his bed, and he said he would put his hand on basically on a Bible and swear to that his father was at his bed during this coronavirus thing. And then he saw his brother in some kind of a strange hallucination dancing around with a magic wand. Just some very strange hallucinations that the guys had when the beast comes at night.
Speaking of the beast, I'm on the LifeSite website that you told us about, LifeSite News, and they say there's talk of mandatory vaccine tattoos for kids.
Ooh.
Mark.
There you go. The mark of the beast, right? The mark of the beast. Have you been vaccinated from the beast or not? That's a good question. Are we going to see that one day soon? We'll find out. I'm Morgan Streetman, and that's the way I see it. Thank you for listening to the Morgan Streetman Show. We hope you enjoyed what you heard, and if you did, please click like and subscribe to help us out. And remember that we recommend that you exercise your brain at least once a week.